power on.
The following is a presentation of the Sovryn Tech podcast feed.
And now for another fast-breaking news story, we go to our roving reporter,
The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, South Zoo, the rated R radio star, is here for you. Talking about, as has much been the case in 2021, really it's been the story of the past couple of years, talking about things that I never expect to actually talk about. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing that I'm going to talk about, but it's unexpected nonetheless. And in this episode, we are going to discuss, there's kind of a lot I want to get to in here, or at least cover a lot of ground. Doesn't necessarily have to be long, but it all stems from that I was graciously given the opportunity. It is gracious. All right. You might say, holy shit, you let a Google product into your life. What are you doing? No, no, it was gracious. I had the opportunity to test out the Google Pixel 6. Now, to be clear, it's not the Pixel 6 Pro. We talked about in a recent Sovryn Shorts, I did cover, the announcement throughout Techtober. Of course, now we're in November of 2021. Can't believe this year is almost over. Surprises to come, folks. Don't worry. But during Techtober, there were so many new products announced, and some of them people have finally been able to get their hands on. And really, it feels like October 2021 or Techtober 2021, if we want to be cheesy, was a tale of many processors. It was a tale of new processors. Intel, made insane announcements with their 12th generation, i9s, which are incredibly powerful and, really, really put, the M1 Max and so on, on notice. And then, you even had the M1 Max, right? Which, wow. And then Google announced with their Pixel 6 line, their Tensor chip, which is, okay, now we got to be clear on this. Yes, is it basically, or does it appear to be a modified Exynos processor, from Samsung? Yeah, it does appear that's what this is. That doesn't mean that Google hasn't done very interesting, innovative, new things with it, or made it significantly more powerful. The same argument goes for the M1. The M1 processors are, essentially souped up ARM processors, right? They're not totally new silicon, from Apple. Not, at the base of it, but, is it, has interesting configurations and customizations been done to where it is a unique animal? Yeah, I think that's true. Just as that is true for the Tensor processor that Google is now putting into their Pixel line. And to me, it's what made the Pixel 6 the most interesting, was that it was getting a custom processor, or, a custom SoC. And there are important reasons that I think that was done. It's not just all about, Google or, every company seems to be wanting to get into, it's custom silicon, right? Its own chips, its own SoCs and everything. Microsoft might be the outlier on that, though they're certainly trying to make Windows play very well with ARM. And, when you notice the announcements of the multiple security flaws coming out of, exploits coming out of Intel and AMD, you can kind of understand, why Microsoft might be looking closer and closer at ARM every day. Because, and now that's Microsoft, but with other companies like Apple, Google, and even Samsung with their Exynos processor, and others. I mean, part of the reason I think that they like to look at their own SoC, their own silicon is security. And that is the Tensor chip, has some claims to fame as far as how well they work out is a whole other story, of security built in. To where, they have like their Titan, security. I mean, you could say it's a glorified TPM, but it might be one that actually works. Now, I've been using the Pixel 6 basically since it came out. And so you could say, well, this isn't like months of using it or a year of using it. And that's fair. Okay. But I think it's been enough time for me to give you, and of course, as the guy who wrote the security manual on Android, I think I have, a worthy opinion and things to share on it. And it's important to grok that this is I think the Pixel line, or anything with the Tensor processor specifically, but certainly the Pixel 6 and up, I think is worthwhile to revisit and re-review every few months. So we'll get in this early review, and then who knows, maybe 6 months from now, we'll get in another review. Why? Because, and this speaks to why companies, and in this case, Google, wants to do, their custom processor. So in Google's own branding for the Pixel 6 line, you can read it right on their webpage. It talks about how every few months you will get updates. I mean, you get updates every month, right? That one of the biggest advantages of having a Google produced phone is the amount, or the speed with which you get security updates, and that you constantly get the latest version of Android, right? And the Pixel 6 line in particular is able to, or they've stated you're going to get the next 3 versions of Android. And it shipped with Android 12, the latest, as it came out, first phone to have it. More or less. Maybe there was something that had it minutes before it, another one of the Pixel phones. I don't know. But anyway, so it ships with Android 12. So arguably you'd get up to Android 15, I guess. And so you'll get the next 3 versions of Android, and you'll get 5 years at least of security updates. Okay. Now, but in their branding, Google says that the Pixel line, particularly the branding for the Pixel 6, or the marketing language for the Pixel 6, is that every few months it's like having a new phone. So they're going to put in new features as they go along. Now here, both of these things are only possible because of the Tensor chip, because Google is making their own processors now. Why? And why? How come they can actually put out the fast updates? How come they can guarantee the lengthy update cycle, longer than any other phone manufacturer? They can say, yep, we're going to give you 5 years at least of updates and all of this. The reason they can do that is part of the reason that they went with a custom processor, that they went with their own processor. See, unless Google is using their own processor, okay, they have to rely on Qualcomm. They have to rely on basically how long does Qualcomm support a Snapdragon processor to where they can even put out updates for a phone. And really every manufacturer, not just Google, is beholden. If you're using Qualcomm, you're beholden to whatever Qualcomm or MediaTek or whoever, whatever company, however long they support a processor. And if they only support a processor, if they only put out drivers for a processor, or, firmware for a processor for 3 years, well, then every manufacturer is just fucking stuck. After 3 years, they can't put out anything else because, Qualcomm or MediaTek isn't putting out new updates. So, I think a lot of people forget this. I mean, that's part of the reason why Apple has been so great about supporting, its back catalog of iPhones, because they control they've had the A series processors for so long, and that's all theirs. They choose, how long these things are going to be supported. They don't have to rely on a third party to tell them when they have to stop. So that in and of itself makes the Tensor chip very exciting, right? Because now Google is in control of the security on it, and they're in control of the development cycle for it, whatever generation or, series of Tensor chip that it happens to be. And of course, in the Pixel 6, it's, generation 1. Now, also because they control the firmware for this processor, like their marketing for the Pixel 6 line says, yeah, every few months or whenever Google deems it, they want it to be a thing, they can put out significantly new features, for their Tensor chipped smartphones. And because of that, that's what I'm saying is that, revisiting the Pixel 6 even, every few months over the next few years could be worthwhile. Now, of course, they're going to make a Pixel 7 next year, and are they going to do that foldable phone? Probably, since we know Android 12L is going to be a thing. But regardless of, how good or bad the Tensor chip is, it is ultimately a good thing for the consumer because you can get the update cycle that Google wants to offer, that really lengthy, multiple versions of Android, as well as, again, all of those security updates. And, this was something, this is a point I didn't really learn until maybe the past 2 or 3 years. And it used to piss me off about how Google's been doing a great job. Oh, all right, hold on. Before I say Google's been doing a great job. Yes, folks, fuck Google. They don't care about your privacy. Okay. So let's be abundantly clear on that. And I'm not going to make the argument. There are arguments to be made. Why would you use Google's hardware? Traditionally, they've been the most open and the most well supported by custom ROMs, et cetera, et cetera. And they were even made, like the Nexus line especially was basically made for developers, which ended up being a good thing for the consumer because you could toss on, again, custom ROMs that could really harden down, like security harden and privacy harden your hardware. Again, the Wi-Fi only Nexus 7 might be the greatest Android device ever made, ever. And, that's the end of it. Or is the Pixel 6? Well, we'll get there, but let's continue. One of the great things Google has been trying to do in the very fractured Android ecosystem overall is to, decouple the security updates from the Android version. And now I thought that was a great idea in the first place. But then, the problem still stood that, say, you had issues like stage fright or some others that you couldn't really do anything about. Like they wouldn't release a patch for it. And unless you ran Android 9, or there were other exploits that, would affect every version of Android before 9. And then there was, the same would be true for 10. Like, 9 had exploits that, that they couldn't fix. They couldn't do anything about, unless you had Android 10. And I've, that's always baffled me. And I'm like, what? Then, fuck, like you decoupled the security updates and then you did, and then you have these new versions of Android, but you've made it so the security updates can actually backport to other versions of Android. What's the issue here? Why can't you fix these exploits in older phones? Well, now I've kind of learned the reality of it. What didn't make sense before now makes sense. And the problem actually isn't with Google. The issue is with, Qualcomm and whoever else that will not continue to support these processors and even make it, really possible, or at the very least viable to implement some of these fixes. Now, to be clear quickly, yes, with custom ROMs, Lineage OS, Calyx OS, whatever. Okay. You can, get newer versions of Android and make them work on older hardware, but that's a lot of trickery and falls really outside of the security model that Google has set up. Okay. And I think that that's a fine thing, but then you're doing so much customization, to make it work. Say to make Android 11, continue to work on an Echo Pro 3, or those phones, going back, and why there are phones that are favored more by the community, by say custom ROMs communities. we're just so future thinking, that, okay, like it has the hardware that we need, that still has a driver that we could actually, go forward with. So it does become cost prohibitive, but the cost prohibitiveness, again, ultimately, what we're realizing now is that it ultimately comes down to Qualcomm and and MediaTek and whoever else. So, now it makes perfect sense, along with having that, that dream, the computer dream, as it were, of, controlling both, developing both the hardware and the software and having that synergy, much like Apple has. But now, we can really see, okay, wait, why does Samsung bother, developing the Exynos processor? Why is Google getting into its own processors, blah, blah, blah? Well, this is a big part of that. The security issues, and length of support for devices, do finally come under the purview, of the manufacturer or of the company itself, in this case, Google or Samsung. And the, Google and Samsung conversation, I'm going to continue that after I actually get into, after I review the Pixel 6 itself. Now, if you want to hear more of the specific technicals, you can go listen to the Techtober episode that I did for 2021, and I dive into that there. We'll get into some of it here, but this is more of, okay, how does this actually, what is it like to actually use this damn thing? So let's get into that. Now, like I said, this is not the Pixel 6 Pro that I am reviewing. A lot of people, I think are more intrigued by that. When I had the opportunity, I was not interested in the Pixel 6 Pro. I'll just say this up front. I think the Pixel 6, between the Pixel 6 and the Pixel 6 Pro, I think the Pixel 6 is actually the better smartphone. The Pixel 6 Pro has really only a couple tricks up its sleeve that are better, shall we say, and that can be subjective, but that are technically better than what the Pixel 6 has. The Pixel 6 Pro, for its camera, has a telescoping lens that gives you like a 4x optical zoom or whatever, or whatever that goes to, and that works really well. It's really great. And if, a phone being a serious camera for you is important and you just want that extra feature, then yeah, the Pixel 6 Pro is awesome for you. The Pixel 6 Pro also has a very specific 5G, in fact, it's a 5G wave that's not even used right now, or a frequency that's not even used right now. That might become a thing in the future, but it does have that over the Pixel 6. The other difference is that the Pixel 6 Pro does have the curve, like the screen curves over the edge. I fucking hate that. Getting rid of bezels is bad enough, but then they have the fucking screen curve over. And I don't mean like the Samsung Edge, the Galaxy Edge, right? That like could show you notifications or something. That's interesting. That actually had like a usage, or like a use case, I should say, where it could give you notifications on the side and, you could actually have the thing facing down and blah, blah, blah. But no, this is just horrible design. And I know I'm not alone in this. You can go read at varying Android news outlets and they all agree that it's just one of the most annoying new trends in smartphones. And, the Pixel 6 has none of the above. It does not, it's that flat screen, okay? And it's only like 0.3 inches smaller than it's 6.4 inches as to where the Pro is 6.7. So there's not like a massive difference in screen, but I think there ultimately is a massive difference in screen because of that lack of curvature around the edges. And I've seen videos of that in use, and it really, I think the curvature makes like text looks funny. Things just look odd. So I like having the flat screen. I'll take that. So I see that as an advantage for the Pixel 6. The other things, the telescoping camera. Yeah, it would have been nice to have in the Pixel 6, I suppose, but you're still getting all of the, custom Pixel camera features on the Pixel 6, the standard one. You get night vision, you get magic eraser, you get all that jazz. And it's still like, I've taken pictures with it and fuck, like, wow, I'm not a photographer, but I'm just blown away by these fucking pictures. They are absolutely stunning. I have a hard time wondering how you could ask for more, other than that zoom, which, hey, that's nice. But otherwise, the camera's the same, and and it does a great job. I know the selfie camera is a little less powerful on the 6 as compared to the 6 Pro, but I'm not one for selfies either. So, that doesn't really matter to me. The other feature is the 5G, frequency specific to, or that the 6 Pro has to kind of future-proof it. I'm going to talk about it, but the first thing I did to this smartphone was I turned off 5G. I ran to turn off 5G on this thing. I'm not interested. 5G just drains the fucking battery, and fuck 5G anyway. And I've talked about that, where 5G is an anti-consumer technology. And I don't mean a health thing. I mean just, the way that it's slow. It drains your battery like a motherfucker. And depending upon, where you live, like it's just not practical, unless you're in the heart of the city. It just doesn't make any sense. And even there, I think it's still bullshit. So I turned off 5G right away. So having that extra 5G frequency doesn't mean anything to me. And not having these features that the Pixel 6 Pro uniquely has led to, a price difference of some $300, depending upon what storage option you get. And the one I have is the 128 gig, and that's totally fine for me, because I'm not going to store a bunch of shit on this. Why would I? It's a smartphone that could be taken away from you at any given moment. It's foolishness. Now, the other thing you might bring up is that, but the Pixel 6 Pro has, more of a, higher resolution screen, whatever it is, 1440p as compared to the Pixel 6's 1080p, and it has 12 gig of RAM. Instead of 8 gig of RAM, which is what the Pixel 6 has. The one that I'm using only has 8 gig of RAM. And I say only, come on, it's amazing that it has 8 gig of RAM. The only is a misnomer. So here's the part you have to understand. The reason that the Pixel 6 Pro has 12 gig of RAM is basically to power, that 1440p screen. If the Pixel 6 Pro had a 1080p screen, it wouldn't need the extra 4 gig of RAM. So you're not, on paper, it looks like the Pixel 6 looks like it's a less powerful phone, but in function, it's not at all, because the Pixel 6 Pro is basically just as fast, or the Pixel 6 is just as fast as the Pixel 6 Pro, because it has the lower resolution screen. And who the hell's going to complain about it being 1080p? As I've said many times on Sovryn Tech, 1080p is the max of which a human being can really appreciate. And you can listen to my entire episode about how 4K, or basically anything above 1080p, is bullshit. I did an entire episode about it, ripping that apart, and I think my point has been made. All right, hold on. All right, just quick on that. So Ellen and I were at a friend's house recently, and we watched what is my favorite movie of all time when we were there. They happen to have it on Netflix, so we didn't watch the extended cut that's available on Blu-ray, but whatever. No, really, I'm not complaining about it. It's just great to, watch great movies with friends. And we were over at friend's house, and we watched Gladiator in what gets touted as 4K via Netflix. Obviously, I don't have a Netflix account. They do, whatever. That's fine. And we're watching the movie, and it's on a 4K screen, whatever. It's like a 50-inch or 40-something inch television, but it's 4K. And I'm watching this, and, okay, I can say, yeah, I recognize that was 4K content, or was, 4K trickery anyway, right? Because it's probably upscaled, and there's so much compression going on because it's streaming anyway. But regardless, okay, I get it that this is what is considered to be the presentation of 4K content. I was not impressed. Now, I get it that it looked different, right? And it looked like you were watching a documentary. It looked like you were there. Okay, here's the problem. That's not how these movies are meant to be seen. They're not supposed to be watched like you're there. They're not supposed to be watched like everything looks like way too fast. It's just and Gladiator's a movie I've watched as much as any movie I could possibly watch next to something with star in the title. And this is not how the movie's meant to be presented at all. Okay, there is meant to be a certain not a cloudiness, not a lack of sharpness or anything like that, but the cinematography, there is meant to be this, I want to call it a haze, but that sounds like I'm saying it's fuzzy. It's not. There is a haze to where you recognize, that this is a film. 4K content's just not supposed to be that way. And I've said this over and over again. Now, you can make an argument for 4K with anything that's based in reality, like, a football game or, I don't know, the mind-numbing shit that people watch on TLC, whatever. You could kind of make an argument for that because that's meant to be a documentary style, or that's meant to be like a representation of realism. But with movies, no, oftentimes movies are, again, that's why you have directors, cinematographers, and all this other stuff. You are presenting things in an artistic fashion. You are not presenting reality. Unless it's the Blair Witch Project, I guess. But even that obviously has its artistic presentation. But I mentioned this just to say that, okay, I watched something in 4K. I get it. I can tell the difference. I know when it's 4K, but then I also know this is not how these things are meant to be seen. This is a lie of a presentation. And it's, dare I say, an insult to everybody that made that film. So for my shocking, scathing statement of this episode, even though there might be others, if you support 4K, all right, for, movies of yore, as in the past, all right, and you love that director who did that work, you love those actors, you love whatever, you are shitting on all of them. You are shitting on your favorite director. You are shitting on your favorite actors. You are shitting on your favorite key grip. You are shitting on your favorite, whatever. You're shitting on them. And frankly, this is true for atmospheric audio as well. No, we're meant to hear shit in stereo. Okay. And I'm not talking about with that. I'm talking about music in general. I'm not talking about, all right, Dolby 5.1, Dolby Atmos, things like this. There is a movie and it's meant to, the sound is designed to surround you. Okay. That's why movies have been made with surround sound, frankly, for decades. You're just getting more precise with the surround sound when you add in channels like that. But when Apple fucking schleps you that you should be listening to Creatures of the Night, by Kiss in atmospheric audio, I don't even know if you can do that. Fuck them anyway if you could. They're lying to you, and it sucks. And trust me, maybe it wasn't Creatures of the Night. I forget what exactly I was listening to, and I was just like, this isn't right. If you want to do this right, you need 4 speakers. You do quadraphonic, that was developed in the goddamn 70s, and is still the best sounding technology, in my opinion, in history. You do that, and that's the end of the story. And put in a Deep Purple album, and we'll have the day. But anyway, not here to talk about that. Okay, let's get this out of the way. The Pixel 6 line, none of them, neither of them. The Pixel 6, and again, I'm mainly talking about the Pixel 6 here. So anything going forward, unless I differentiate by saying the Pixel 6 Pro, I'm just talking about the standard Pixel 6. But again, they're so similar other than the things I mentioned previously. No headphone jack. That sucks. I mean, that really sucks. Ellen looked at it and she was like, what moron thought of that? And I was like, I know. All right. Here's the thing. So in my opinion, the only valid argument for getting rid of, getting rid of an aux jack, getting rid of a headphone jack, the 1/8 jack. You could make an argument from security that you want to secure this device so much, okay, that you will not allow an analog port that could potentially, that the argument would go that you could somehow bypass the security that maybe would be available on a USB-C port, maybe, okay, but you could say, less ports, less attack vectors. That's a simple argument that one could make. I don't buy it. I don't buy that for a second, because they never really tell you that. You know, like they never really say that. Up until maybe the Pixel 6 line, which is the first one to not have the headphone jack, if I recall. Because this is the first one where Google really is touting, you know, like the Titan, and that's the name of it, the Titan security built into the device itself. But bottom line, I think that's rubbish. If anything, you know, just fucking put in, like, there's just no argument for this as far as security. If that was the argument, then just put a splitter built into the phone itself that splits off from the USB-C port that creates an automatic converter for a 1/8 jack. You know, for the plug. Like that's it. Because otherwise you just buy the dongle that does that, right? Which I have done. And, you know, supposedly these dongles give you that hi-fi audio because it's being, you know, it goes through, through the digital, through USB-C. And sure, I can understand where that sounds a little bit better. Okay, I've even heard it where it sounds a little bit better. But then just do the splitter inside the goddamn phone. You make these things so fucking tall anyway, right? Now all these smartphones are 21:9 as it is. So there's something weird about that, and it's not the thinness, because this phone, and I applaud it, is plenty thick. This is a heavy phone, the Pixel 6. I'm not complaining about it. I like the premium feel of it. And again, because it doesn't have, the curved screen, it does have a nice, solid, grippy side bezel anyway. I mean, it's basically all screen. You know, you can't wait to get a case on this thing. But it does have a good, premium, solid feel to it. And I think, because I've also held the Pixel 6 Pro, I think the Pixel 6 feels a lot more premium, ironically, than the Pixel 6 Pro. The Pixel 6 Pro just feels more fragile. That's a subjective thing. It's a feel thing, because we know, we've seen the YouTube videos of where these phones, the Pixel 6 line gets tested as far as toughness, and it does pretty damn well for itself. So anyway, it's another area where I feel like the Pixel 6 is a superior phone to the Pixel 6 Pro. So it's got a good solid feel to it. Okay, let's keep going with this. Of course, everybody talked about how it has the giant camera bump on the back. Both the 6 and the 6 Pro have that. And I like that because for a couple of reasons. Okay, one is, and again, if you're willing to put the camera bump on it, why aren't you willing to put in any extra size for a fucking headphone jack? God damn it. You see what I mean? Their arguments don't make any sense. Unless it's the security argument, but they've got to be more open about that and make that. Sell me the reason that you don't have it anymore. And you can't just say courage, because you're a fucking liar when your MacBook still has a headphone jack, you son of a bitch. Sorry, just drives me nuts. The marketing speaks sometimes. Anyway, so I like the camera bump. I dig it. That's fine. Especially like when you put on particularly a Google branded case. They made their own cases for this. And we don't need to get into the colors. The Pixel 6 has more colors. I have, what is it? Something like somewhat seafoam is the name of it or whatever. It's like a green, and that's nice enough. It's nice to have something that just isn't a black slab, for fuck's sake. But anyway, so the camera bump, I don't mind, partly because it is a very slippery phone. Like, this baby will slide right out. And the camera bump actually helps ground it, when you don't have a case on it. But I do have one of the official Google cases on it. And obviously that helps a lot with the lack of slipperiness, and it gives you some bezel to actually hold onto. I find it interesting that Google, made its own case that improves upon the grippability of these phones. It's like they knew what they were doing. It's almost like they planned on it, that, yeah, we want the markup of the $30 case, to offset the cost of these phones, because these are, in my opinion, flagship operational phones, but they cost anywhere from 25 to 40% less than your average flagship phone, say from Samsung, but they have the same performance. Part of that comes down to the Tensor chip. Now, the Tensor chip is pretty clearly customized for a couple of things. Machine learning / AI, whatever those terms mean to you. But ultimately, yes, that's a lot of what that customization on the Exynos processor that makes the Tensor processor. That's what that's about. This is a processor. The Tensor chip, okay, is really good at parallel processing. Really, really good at that. It's also, the GPU is fairly powerful, the GPU aspects are fairly powerful on it. And you can see all of that in operation. Particularly the parallel processing. And a lot of that comes down to that machine learning where, and we talked about this when we did the initial discussion of what Google had announced with the Pixel 6 line, that a lot of things that a smartphone historically, ever since smartphones have been a thing, historically would do in the cloud, would do by connecting to servers, the Pixel 6 is doing on device. This is a very smart move on Google's part for a few different reasons. One of the reasons, and I mean like translation, like live translation, which is a feature where the Pixel can essentially translate anything that appears on its screen. It's not just like Google Translate. It's like Google Translate on your phone, on your own screen. Like that. There are a lot of other little features, which I may not get to all of them because there are so many when you get into the settings on this thing. But it handles a lot of that processing, a lot of the photo processing, a lot of these other things. It's handling it all on device. Again, that's a smart move, because, if you're trying to push 5G on everybody, 5G just isn't ready. Hopefully it's never ready, but it's just not ready for the masses. And so you can't count on a consistent 5G connection. And if you did, it's going to drain the fuck out of the thing's battery. Okay, so you're saving, data for one, transmission and receivership. You're saving that for an infrastructure that's just not ready, and you're saving the battery of the thing by having, all of that processing, post-processing done on the device itself. You're also making an argument for privacy, which is something that really no other company has tried to take Apple on about. And that Apple, specifically in 2021, is losing on because of the bullshit that they were talking about with iCloud. Now, it's not to say that Google isn't doing the same damn thing, but then here's my other controversial comment for this episode. I think Google, with the Pixel 6 line specifically, may be doing privacy better than Apple themselves. And this is more true if you are using Google Fi with the Pixel 6, which I think a lot of people are. I think, in fact, maybe, I don't know. However, I've heard numbers that Google will produce, anywhere between 3 million, or traditionally they've produced around 3 million Pixel phones every year. With the Pixel 6 line, they're doing like 7 million. And I don't know if that's 7 million between the 6 and the 6 Pro, or if it's 7 million each. But, credit to Google. I mean, they've got to be feeling pretty good about themselves. These phones, the 6 and the 6 Pro, were incredibly hard for people to get their hands on. I mean, these babies sold out. And there's still people who ordered them on the Google store, before launch day, that are, I think, still waiting on getting their hands on their Pixel 6 phone. So this baby is selling. Okay. But when you include Google Fi on this, because if you recall, one of the things that Apple was doing with the photos was it was also scanning the hashes of photos when you sent them in iMessage, right? Now, if you're using Google Fi and you're using Android messages, and which is Android messages with RCS is with RCS enabled, is Google's answer to iMessage. Okay, and if you have chat features enabled, if you have RCS enabled, you're doing between Android phones, you're doing end-to-end encryption. Okay, as long as you're both using Google Messages, and not only that, I mean, Google's even besting Apple in that now, if you're a Google Fi customer. Okay. You're using just the stock phone app. They're end-to-end encrypting phone calls. Now remember, end-to-end, all being done on device. And that's particularly the big deal with the Pixel 6 line, is that because of the Tensor processor, everything's being done, offline, or a lot more anyway, is being done offline. And because of that alone, I think they're doing privacy better than Apple is. Now, is Apple doing privacy well in the first place? No. So, and Apple's constantly scheming around privacy, right? That's why they buy up companies so that it doesn't have to follow their we only keep data for 6 months rule, right? We've talked about this. So, it's not like Google's doing that much better, but I'm just saying that in comparison to Apple, with the Pixel line, they're actually beating Apple, I think, at their own game. So, and I have to tell you, like, I haven't used a flagship phone as a daily driver for a very, very long time. A very, very long time. And I got to admit, getting back into, talking more about the, how the Pixel 6, functions, in daily operation. Man, this thing is smooth as fuck. I mean, it is fast. I'm not seeing any weak spots in speed with the Tensor chip. So it's delivering on that end. And again, you have plenty of RAM, for it to do so also. But yeah, I mean, this thing is just so fast. The camera, that's what a lot of people talk about with the Pixel line, because Google's cameras it's post-processing really, like it's computational work that it does on the photos that it takes is considered best in the industry, arguably beating Apple. I think people could, kind of go both ways on it. I've heard other commentators say, no, I think the Apple 13 still takes a better picture, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, like, again, I'm not a big photo guy, but the photos that I take with this thing are just unbelievable. Like I just can't get over it, how good they look. But of course, if you're privacy minded, I'd say that's a bug, not a feature. Having a better camera is actually a bad thing. Now, how about battery life? Battery life, I think, is actually great for a phone that doesn't tout itself as having a massive battery, which it doesn't. It's not like the Moto G Power, which I was using previously, which that, got me like 3-4 days, of usage on one charge. Fucking amazing. And I can use a phone pretty heavy, on any given day. This phone easily gets me through the day, easily gets me into, like, I feel like I get a day and a half out of this thing. Now, to be clear, I shut off, like 80% of features that this thing wants to tout, like, the always on screen, active display, a lot of this other stuff. I will turn most of those features right off. And like I said, I turned off 5G instantly. 4G is fine for me. I have no interest in 5G. That's the only like palatable thing about phones that have 5G as a feature is that, at least for now, you can still turn it off, and just use 4G. So, I've been doing that as well. So, because there were people initially that were complaining about the battery life, saying, man, this thing drains in half a day. And a lot of people came out and said, that might be due to the fact that 5G sucks, which I was glad to see, traditional news outlets admit to that. But yeah, I turn a lot of things off. Something else that all right, hold on. So some features I have left on. Like the Pixel line has an entire like security hub now, which I applaud, that it's straight up, it's telling you what it is. And it's actually very well rounded what the security hub features, including a lot of privacy aspects. Again, you got to believe Google that they, are going to respect your privacy, because they don't have to and usually don't, behind your back. But in marketing, it's there. Okay. So, in the security hub, there are a lot of features that allow for a lot of active listening, not active display, but active listening. Like there is a feature, and I know Apple's going to be, implementing it into their iPhones going forward, or I think that's the rumor, but there's a feature where it can detect if you get into a car crash and it will call your emergency contact. And these are things that I've kind of tested out, and, they have mitigations in it to if it's a false positive where, it won't call that contact for like a minute and it'll be notifying you so you can turn it off within that minute and so on. A lot of interesting features. There's an active listening feature where it can hear what music, is playing around you. I did test that out and it works, and it correctly identifies the song if it knows the song. And I found it humorous that many times, because me, again, part of the reason that I run a NAS for my music and I have my own music library, is look, Spotify doesn't fucking have the music I listen to. Okay. I don't know of any music streaming service out there that has a large percentage of the music that I usually listen to. I listen to rare shit. Okay. And so because of that, I think that all music streaming services suck. Unless it's attached to your own library, which Google used to have the best thing for that, Google Play Music, which lets you upload your own songs. Don't tell me about Apple doing that. We know the issues that happened there. And Google Play Music fell prey to the same issues. I just, again, you want something where it's your library and your library only, right? Anyway, so anytime I'm playing my music, it has no idea what the hell it is. And sometimes this isn't even like unpopular stuff. Yeah, I listen to rare stuff, but it's usually not like, so many times it's not unpopular. Like it never seems to pick up when I'm listening to Whitesnake. It never seems. This feature really just feels like a marketing feature for the entertainment industry. Okay. So it works, but it only works with modern stuff. And I think that's by design. Like it's designed to ultimately sell you music or, whatever, get you into. And I'm sure there's some kind of controls that are handled by, the RIAA in conjunction with Google or something like that. Where, recognize these songs, it's a bullshit feature. It works, but again, I think it's something that's really controlled by the entertainment industry, and Google, which Google is absolutely a part of the entertainment industry. YouTube, anyone? Okay. I mean, it's similar to how, say you go to like the storefront for Google Music or like the storefront on iTunes or whatever. They never promote in the big banner up top. They never promote like the new LA Guns album. They never promote shit from, like even newer bands. Like you never get a promotion for Heat or Beast in Black, or like the new Crazy Licks album, which is fucking brilliant. You never get that. Because that's not about you finding new music. That's about you finding music that the system, that the legacy industry wants to schlep on you. That's what that's about. And I think this feature is the same thing. So it works, but it's bullshit. But yeah, I turn off so many other things like, gesture navigation. Fuck that shit. I turned that off instantly. I have no interest. The only gesture I ever felt like that was actually useful is on Motorola phones where they have, you shake the phone and it turns the flashlight on. I missed that. I'll admit it. I missed the fuck out of that. On the Pixel 6, that should just become a standard feature for Android. But gesture navigation just should not. And it does give you the opportunity to switch back to the 3 button, where it's, the square, the circle, the triangle, where you can go back to that, thankfully. I mean, I think Google it'd be such a fail, and somebody would make an app that would allow you to switch back anyway, but it'd be such a fail if they didn't allow for that. But it's, this leads to a very important point. The Pixel phones, unlike the Nexus phones, I would argue, had a pure version of Android on them. The idea that the Pixel, that the Google phones in the Pixel line are like some kind of stock Android, look, that's just not true. That's not true anymore. It hasn't been true for years. The best way to get anything close to stock Android might be buying a Motorola or a Nokia, as far as getting like AOSP. Or, you can put Lineage OS or whatever on. Okay. But like stock Android essentially just does not exist anymore. There was a time with I think with the Nexus line where it did, but that's not true anymore. Google does so many customizations on the Pixel line. Like it's, Samsung has their own UI, right? OnePlus has their own UI and so on. I mean, Google has gotten to the point that they have the Pixel UI, if you want to call it that. And this point is going to get to the Google/Samsung conversation I want to have at the end of this, but let's keep going. So I turn a lot of that stuff off, and maybe that's why the battery lasts, a day and a half for me. But yeah, I have no issues there. And maybe that might be why I don't see the difference between the 8 gigabytes and 12 gigabytes, between the two Pixel models. But it works perfectly well and has, most of the advanced features I could still use. A lot of them, again, I don't think would hurt too much. But I don't need the active display. Like, fuck no. So, and I turn off things like haptic feedback. I kill all of that. That's not necessary. And granted, I do keep a pretty limited number of apps, like that, because the more apps and the more notifications you get, that's going to drain your battery as well. All those background processes, of course, it's going to kill your battery. But I generally steer clear of that. And I still have because Pixel they have unique, especially the Pixel 6 has unique live wallpapers. And I've been running those live wallpapers ever since I got the phone. And I don't see them draining the battery significantly in any way. That used to not be true. It used to be if you had a live wallpaper running, where it's moving in the background, it was going to drain your battery. I mean, a good 20%. That's not true anymore, which I'm glad, because it's really, frankly, it's gorgeous. Some of these wallpapers, like even the plants that they have on it that are kind of moving as you move the phone, and, the planet spinning and all that. It's impressive. But again, we're at the point where, because of the Tensor chip, where Google is really in charge of the hardware now. And so they can customize, a lot of these even tiny features, to work really well with the hardware and to not drain the battery, right? So speaking of that, one of the big, as far as look goes, one of the big deals that was coming along with Android 12, or particularly the Pixel line, is what's called Material You. Now, I can't stand, these kinds of developments. Or really what I can't stand, I'm fine. You want to make your OS prettier? Okay, go ahead, as long as it doesn't sacrifice speed or battery drain, or anything like that, as long as there's no real sacrifice to be had for it, go ahead. I don't care. But the big deal that news outlets make about these things is what drives me nuts. I mean, like the amount of stories about Material You that were posted on Android Police or wherever, I don't fucking care. I just want to jam a pencil in my ear. It just doesn't mean shit, until it actually works. And Material You is it's a big deal and the argument goes is that it will allow the system to Android to theme, even your icons, just theme everything to match the color of, say, your wallpaper. It creates a unified theme, color scheme, I should say, throughout the entire system. And this works more or less, but it's going to take a while. Most app icons don't work with it, So, I mean, essentially, if you had a green plant in your background on your smartphone, then, the icons and everything would take on colors that match that background. It looks nice when it works, but it's not there yet. Okay. And it's technically, it's still in beta anyway, but I don't care about that, but whatever, it's there. So, okay. Yeah, niceties aside, this phone gets the job done and more. This is a blazing fast phone. And it's got a lot of really nice little features, especially if you don't give a shit about your privacy. Holy shit, the things this phone must do for you. I was even thinking, I'm like, yeah, this whole the emergency setup on it, where if you get in a car crash or some of the other things, fuck, if you're going to take my privacy, you might as well help save my life, And I was like, well, yeah, it's bullshit, but okay. That there's a feature, that makes it almost not really, but that makes it almost worthwhile. So the Pixel 6, I think, is a truly great smartphone for what smartphones are. Is it without, is it without issue? No, there are issues. Let's talk about them. Okay. Again, some of these issues aren't actually issues for me because I don't use a smartphone in that way, or I don't care. Yeah, the lack of a 1/8 jack, of a headphone jack, boy, that really rubs my rhubarb. That pisses me off. There's also a lack of a micro SD card slot for memory expansion. People might be pissed. I have old tastes in smartphones where I want the battery to be removable. It's not, on this, obviously that's other than maybe Nokia. I think that's essentially a dead feature now, with most smartphone companies. That sucks, not having a replaceable battery, of course. It sucks to not have a micro SD card slot. One could get into whether or not like that's a security feature. And okay, you could kind of make an argument for that, but then you also still have a SIM card slot. Like, I believe you about the micro, and look, Google phones have never had a SD card slot, so it's nothing new, and it's been true for, almost 10 years now. But so I expected that, but I'm just saying, yeah, I wish I had one. But the issue with, okay, yeah, we're not going to put in a micro SD card slot, and you want to make that an argument for security, but you still have a replaceable SIM, so you can still get into the phone in such a way that a micro SD card slot would have been possible. Even though it does have an eSIM. So, it didn't need to have that SD card slot. And I would have believed them more if it didn't have the micro SD card slot, if it didn't have the SIM card slot, but whatever. So there's that. Those things, suck. The thing that a lot of people are complaining about. Okay, yes, there was the bug where Google Assistant was making phone calls. Okay, this is just one of those things that I turn off. I turn off Google Assistant instantly. I don't want Google Assistant doing jack shit for me. Okay. And some would argue, then why get a Google phone? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, I've described some of the amazing features that this thing has, some of which I can appreciate. Again, also it's like, if you were buying one of these, especially for $600 for a Pixel 6, not the Pro, but for just the 6, you're getting the best value on the planet as far as the smartphone goes. I mean, that's essentially the cheapest, a flagship phone out there. But and this is the main feature that I'd want a Google phone for, is getting the updates right away as fast as possible. Not just security updates, but also, also Android version updates, and getting them for a very long time. I mean, this is attractive to me to get the next 3 versions of Android and get 5 years of security updates outside of that. That's a very attractive proposition to somebody who's a cybersecurity specialist like myself, somebody who's written the fucking security manual on Android. It's a great thing. Okay. And that's worth it alone. But anyway, Google Assistant was placing phone calls, and I just hope that makes people realize, hey, maybe Google Assistant isn't a good idea. But Google's already patched that. Right? And easy enough for them to do because they control the hardware now. So, that is what it is. The other thing that a lot of people are having issue with on this is the fingerprint reader. The fingerprint reader is on the screen. Okay. Like, it's underneath the screen. It's not a fingerprint reader that's like a built-in fingerprint reader or a traditional, fingerprint reader that's on the back or that's on the power button or something like that. This is one that's in the screen. So there's a very specific target on the screen itself that you have to hit for it to work. And a lot of people are finding it to be incredibly slow. The other thing I don't like about it is the way that type of, optical fingerprint reader works. It has to flash your fingerprint. And so there is like a camera flash that goes on every time that you press it. Now, if you're like me, and sometimes, it's late at night and you're, in a dark room and reading it, and looking at your phone. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. In fact, it's a bad habit, but, maybe sometime in the future, I'll be able to stop doing that. There's certain times of the day where it's the only time that you can fucking relax. And so that's what you do. But that just kills it. And it's ironic too, because one of the things I like that Android, I don't know if it's an Android 12 feature or if it's a Pixel feature, but it has the extra dim button in the drop-down menu. So you can still, you can make the screen as dim as you normally can on any smartphone, but then it has a button for extra dim, and that's great. I love that. Now I don't have to install a separate app, because the more apps you install, that creates more attack vectors, right? And who knows what you're installing sometimes. So I thought that was, and again, it makes the extra dim, system wide, other than the fucking fingerprint reader. So I think that's a fail to have the flash on that. But a lot of people think it's a fail because you have to hit the target just right, and it can be very slow to open your smartphone. For me, this isn't an issue at all because I don't use biometrics. I think biometrics are a horrible idea and are flawed by their very nature. So a lot of people were clamoring for, hey, the Pixel 6 is great, but boy, I wish it had a traditional, fingerprint scanner on it. It doesn't matter to me, For me, it just makes it a more svelte phone that it doesn't have a fingerprint reader anywhere else. Because again, I don't use it. Now, Google came out with a response to this because it's been the main criticism for the Pixel 6 line is the failure and sluggishness of the fingerprint reader on screen. So here's what Google had to say. This is directly from them. We're sorry for the hassle. The Pixel 6 fingerprint sensor utilizes enhanced security algorithms. In some instances, these added protections can take longer to verify or require more direct contact with the sensor. All right, here's the problem with that. And that's end quote. Here's the problem with that. The fingerprint, and this speaks to why I have a problem with biometrics in general. There was also reports that the fingerprint sensor was reading false positives, where it was allowing other people to log into the smartphone. Now, okay, this problem of tricking fingerprint sensors is part of the reason that I think, whether they admit it or not, why Apple got away from why they got away from Touch ID, why they got away from fingerprint sensors as much as they could. And they went to Face ID. Because, like, if you remember, because we reported it on Sovryn Tech years ago, people were like just putting their nipple onto the Touch ID and it would unlock the phone, the iPhone. Look, biometrics are too easy to trick or they are too hard for you to sufficiently control. Okay. So I don't use biometrics anyway. And some people were saying, some commentators were saying, well, I think what Google should do is reintroduce Face ID and then this won't be an issue. Fuck no. Folks, we're going into a future where cryptocurrencies are the norm. Okay. In many ways, I mean, we're there, or we're that close, right? And you're going to be storing those on your phone. Why the fuck, when you're talking about having that kind of money on the line, or even that speculative amount of money on the line, why the fuck would you count on security that can be accessed while you are not conscious? Do you see what I mean? If somebody knows that you are someone that, or if it gets to the point where everybody has, some amount of crypto, say, on their smartphone, it's so easy to beat you over the head. And then, they can just use your face to unlock the smartphone, or they can just use your hand to unlock the smartphone. Or there's, issues around like Fifth Amendment protections, which you don't really have those protections anyway. But regardless, don't make it easy for them. Have your arguments where you can have them. Fifth Amendment protections get thrown out the door when you use biometrics. Biometric security is a horrible idea across the board, and it will never be a good idea. I've covered that too many times on Sovryn Tech. I'm not going to recover the ground here. I'm giving you the simple, 2021, 2022 answers as to why it's a horrible idea. But I don't give a shit that the fingerprint sensor doesn't work. If anything, it's just more of an argument for people to not use it and go back to using their PIN numbers, right? And if you want to do PIN numbers right, do at least 6 numbers. Thank you. Have a good day. So, people say this is a flaw. No, this is a feature, not a bug to have a shitty fingerprint sensor. Good. Because I don't recommend anybody ever use these things anyway. And Face ID, that's not a solution. That's just 10 times worse. Then somebody could just anyway, you get my point. And I mean, hey, I'd love it if Google would explain what the hell that enhanced security is. Like, yeah, give me the technical breakdown on that. Oh, it's proprietary? Oh, of course. Yeah, no, not when you got people reporting that, oh yeah, no, anybody's able to get into my smartphone, with a fingerprint unlock because the fingerprint reader sucks ass. So, well, again, this is true for all of them. This isn't just a Pixel problem. If you don't think it's true now, it eventually will be. Anyway, so that said, again, I don't see that as a problem. So for me, the Pixel 6, not the 6 Pro, the Pixel 6 is, minus the 5G bit of business out there. Previously, I would argue that the Moto X4, especially if it's running Lineage OS, was the best, smartphone out there. Okay. Just like that was the top tier was the Moto X4. But if you are, a little more conventional and you're using a smartphone, and like you're not using an anti-Google smartphone, and you just want like this, really solid Android experience that still has like the best security and perhaps privacy that you can get outside of an anti-Google smartphone, like say, again, Calyx OS, Lineage OS, or even like a Linux phone or something like that, then yeah, I think the Pixel 6, not even the 6 Pro, I think the Pixel 6 is the best smartphone out there. Again, turn off 5G on it right away. Kill Google Assistant, don't use the fingerprint reader. And yeah, it's the best experience out there. And you're going to, again, for security, you're going to get those security updates for years, longer than any other smartphone company. Now, that said, and I mean, also, even if you're into like Calyx OS and, and some of these others, now, I'm not 100% sure if, because Google now has control, like with the Tensor chip and so on, or like where you run into issues with the Exynos chip on Samsung devices, where custom ROMs don't work very well, with smartphones using these SoCs. If you run into that, then maybe it's not good for, one of the beauties of the Pixel line and especially the Nexus line was that you could count on the custom ROM communities like developing for those for many, many years, right? That may not be true, going forward as the Tensor chip, gets more and more locked down. But if you're buying stock and you're not going to get into any of that fanciness, then yeah, I think the Pixel 6 is the best smartphone on the planet today. I think it blows away even, iPhones. You could argue that that's, apples and oranges, but like I think it even blows away iPhones. Especially when it comes to customizability and features that are already in it that are potentially yet to come, on iPhone. So that said, I had like an overarching point that I want to get to here. And that is, let's take a look at the future of smartphones. Where are we going with all of this? Okay. I think we talked about it. I really recommend you go listen to that Techtober episode because we did discuss this there. Like, where's Apple going with things, right? Apple is going into AR, augmented reality. I think Google is doing the same thing. I personally think that, especially with the Pixel line, that the gesture navigation, all of that is not about making navigating your smartphone easier, right? I think that totally has to do with getting you used to operating to functions happening when you move your fingers in a certain way. And that is all about getting past the smartphone. That is all about getting to that place where, it is augmented reality and the Tensor chip is maybe in like the latest version of Google Glass, which will, eventually become a thing. Like I said, Apple's going in the same direction. Okay. It's about getting to AR, right? And that's what 5G is about, where you're having this constant connectivity wherever you happen to go. And it's a connectivity that, is multi-beam, this infrastructure is all about that. Okay. And the Tensor chip, getting it used to doing a lot of things on device, while right now you could maybe call it privacy respecting and more secure. Okay. When it's done on device, I think that does make it more secure inherently. Eventually is leading to where, it can interact best, most efficiently with the 5G infrastructure. So that, again, that's what I think, a lot of the gestures are about. That's what Google Assistant is about, because if you want something done, you're either going to make a gesture or you're going to tell Google Assistant to do it, right? Apple eventually wants, the AirPods to effectively be like the computer that you interact with. That's not anything new. I've talked about that before. Audio is a big part of AR. That's why, also, there were Pixel Buds that came along with this. I have no interest in those. In fact, it's probably pretty funny because like the usual headphones that I use with my Pixel 6 are a pair of old, not AirPods, but whatever, I don't know, what do you call them? whatever Apple calls their headphones. I forget the name, but I'm using, like classic Apple headphones that would normally come with an iPod or that used to come with an iPhone. Because they don't jam into your ear, they just sit on your ear without being over your ear. I don't like in-ear headphones at all. And I have these hooked up to a dongle that are connecting, to USB-C onto into the Pixel 6. So it's funny that I'm using, an Apple product for such an important aspect of a Google smartphone. But yeah, I'm not going to have shit jam into my ear. The Surface Buds, like whatever those are, the Surface earbuds, those are cool because they don't actually go into they don't jam into your ear. They don't have you still can hear, you still have ambient awareness, which is so important to me. I think people are rolling the dice with their fucking lives when they're jamming shit into their ears to where they can't hear, ambient noise. Wow, man. Your personal meat space security threat model is so fucking off when you do that. But whatever. Anyway, so I don't have the Pixel earbuds at all. I didn't, test those in any way. Now let's be clear here. It could be years. It could be a decade before we get to a point where, the AR future that Apple and Google are banking on. And I don't even mean the metaverse. I mean AR. Okay. In fact, I think Google would be smart to just skip the metaverse. I think it's smart for any company to skip the fucking metaverse. That's, a conversation for another episode. But it might be years before we get to that. Okay. So in between now and then, and Samsung's doing the same thing. Okay. In between now and then, I think that really in the Android space, the only smartphones that matter in Android, okay, unless if you're into Calyx OS and you're into, Lineage OS and all that else, you know what you're doing, baby. And you're doing it right and you're doing better stuff. Okay. But in the just, you pick it up off the shelf and away you go. Okay. Space. And that it runs Android. In my opinion today, there are really only two smartphone companies. Okay. There's, at least in the United States, and that's it. There's Google and there's Samsung, and that's it. And Samsung knows, I think they're very aware, and the numbers show it. It's not like it's a hidden fact, but just how dominant they are. They're bigger than Apple, and obviously they're infinitely bigger than what Google puts out there. Google is kind of playing catch up right now. But obviously they're doing pretty well with a smartphone like the Pixel 6 or smartphones like the Pixel 6 line. But that's why, Samsung is doing the A series, right? Because they know they need to get in that lower tier. But, it's really to the point, the only smartphone companies and Motorola is still trying to do interesting things. I don't want to knock them to, really. I've been using Motorola for so many years, and all different models, but yeah, it's Samsung and Google. And if you want to talk, the big three, I think it's really it's Apple, Samsung, and Google. Those are the smartphones that they're the ones that I think it only makes sense to get. Again, if you're into Calyx OS and other things, totally different story. But off the shelf, that's where we're at. Microsoft is doing interesting things to do with the Duo, but I don't think that's going to, when the Duo 3 hits for Microsoft, then they're going to be a player. Okay, but not until then. And Android 12L is obviously looking at that. But that's it. It's down to these companies. I am shocked, and maybe it'll end up becoming a thing. I'm shocked that Google's not. Now they said they're not going to come out with the new Chromebook, I think, in 2022. I believe that was the claim. I'd be shocked if they didn't start using the Tensor processor in Chromebooks as well. And, I think that would be incredibly intelligent of them to do. And then they really will be, using Apple's playbook, which is a winning one. Again, it's Google. If you're somebody who gives a shit about your privacy, hardcore and all that stuff, it's not where you're going to go anyway. Right. So all of this would be moot for you. But if you have a job or clients or whatever, where we're having, some traditional tech, like a more traditional smartphone, it matters, like say iPhone or, something like that. Well, then here are your options. In my opinion, it all comes down to, and going into the future, it's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to Samsung, Google, and, and Apple. And like those will be the three companies. And and Samsung and Google are really working tightly together, on a lot of different things. So I'm curious how that will take shape, but anyway, if you need a new smartphone, is the Pixel 6 a great buy? Yeah, absolutely. If you can afford it, absolutely. Should you wait perhaps for, if you want to try like a foldable phone, should you wait for the Pixel foldable, whatever that ends up looking like? Yeah, I think you could wait. If you can wait another year, I think you're going to have my guess is with Android 12L getting announced that a Pixel foldable is going to get released next year. That's just a prediction. I think it only makes sense. People are expecting it this year, but I think next year you might finally see that. Or, at that point, maybe you're going to think if a Duo 3 is available, then maybe that will make sense because Android will be working with dual screen phones or foldable phones better. If you want to wait for that future, then okay. So, and again, we're talking from a very basic consumer level, right? Or from a more tech enthusiast level. If we're talking about anti-state privacy and all that jazz, no. If you're anti-state or, if you're concerned about that level of privacy because you're that kind of activist, you shouldn't have a smartphone. Flat out, right? But maybe you're like me where sure, like you even care about activism at that level, but then you also work at you have a job or you work remotely or wherever where you are kind of required to have a smartphone that can run this app for your enterprise space, can do this and that and blah. You get it, right? I mean, that's the system that we do happen to live in, and that unless you're incredibly independently wealthy, you can't run away from just yet. But in that legacy system, yeah, the Pixel 6 is, as far as smartphones, best thing going today, in my opinion. I mean, for the updates alone, it's the best thing going. And it's competitive hardware. It's hardware that's competitive with Samsung and significantly lower in price. Again, Samsung and Google are working together again very nicely. So I don't know what that's ultimately going to end up, looking like, but those are the two I can't recommend, buying outside of them, and they're going to be the dominant players going forward. Outside of the United States, I mean, sure, you have, Huawei is trying to stay relevant. You have Xiaomi, which is just a giant. You have other companies out there that are doing things, but most of their like amazing phones aren't even available in the United States anyway. So I'm speaking more from the United States going into the future, that may grow, right? And security is really important right now. I mean, it's really, really important. Having these updates is the most, and Android One phones seem to have kind of fallen away. So this is the best way to make sure you get all of those updates. And I think it is important to get those updates if you engage with the legacy system. So that's where we're at. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed the review and, my thoughts on it. And I think we got into, some side subjects that make it all worthwhile, even if you don't give a shit about smartphones. And bravo for you if you don't. So we'll wrap this one up. More Sovryn Tech to come. I will see all of you, on the other side.
Hey, is Sovryn Tech not enough for you? Well, let me tell you about something you'll never get enough of. No, I mean it. We're talking about a radio show and podcast that goes all night long, 7 nights a week, 3 hours a night, 365 days a year, and has been going since the early aughts, baby. I am talking about none other than Free Talk Live. It's the show you control. That's right. It's an open phones call-in show that is ready for you. And if you're worried that your voice isn't going to get heard, don't be. We are talking about the only libertarian radio show stateside. And not only that, it's also the number 26 talk show in the United States. Start listening now and go ahead and hit that massive back catalog at freetalklive.com. The Golden Stallion guarantees a good time, and you might even find some episodes with me on them when you do. That's freetalklive.com, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech.